In the small village where the sun beat down without mercy, Patience carried more than just firewood on her back. She carried the weight of her family, the sting of her husband's indifference, and the silent fear of what the next day would bring. Every morning, she would rise before the first rooster crowed. Her hands already rough and calloused from a life of relentless labor, she would head to the farm, her baby, Blessing, strapped securely to her back, a small, warm weight against the vast emptiness in her heart. Her husband, Emmanuel, saw the world through the bottom of a palm wine gourd. His days were a hazy blur of laughter, with friends under the shade of the mango tree, a world away from the sweat and toil that defined Patience's existence. He was a man running from responsibility, hiding a secret that hung over their heads like a gathering storm, a debt of 50,000 naira, a sum so large it felt like a sentence. He'd borrowed it with grand promises of a business venture that never materialized, choosing instead the easy comfort of drink and denial. Patience knew nothing of this debt. She only knew the ache in her muscles, the constant worry of stretching their meager earnings, and the growing distance between herself and the man she had married. She would return from the fields, her body screaming for rest, only to find Emmanuel in his usual spot. His eyes glazed over, a careless smile on his face. Her pleas for help were met with dismissive waves of his hand, or empty promises that evaporated with the morning dew. Tomorrow, Patience, tomorrow, he would say, but tomorrow never came. The community watched, their whispers like the rustling of dry leaves. Some pitied Patience, their eyes filled with a sad understanding. Others judged her, clucking their tongues. Their words were sharp, but they were a distant pain compared to the sharp, immediate reality of her life. She had built a wall around her heart, not out of anger, but out of necessity. It was the only way to keep going, to put one foot in front of the other, to focus on the one thing that brought her joy, her daughter, Blessing. Patience poured all her hopes into the harvest. The yams and cassava in her shed were more than just food. They were survival. They were school fees for Blessing, a new roof for their leaking hut, a sliver of security in a life defined by its absence. She worked with a fierce determination, guarding her produce like a dragon guarding its treasure. This harvest was her fortress, her one defense against the world's harshness and her husband's neglect. One evening, as the sky bled into hues of orange and purple, a neighbor's frantic shouts pierced the air. "Fire! Fire!" She ran, her legs pumping, a cold dread washing over her. The smell of smoke was thick, acrid, and horrifyingly familiar. It was coming from her shed. By the time she reached it, flames were devouring everything, turning her months of back-breaking work into a mountain of black, smoldering ash. She stood there, frozen, as the fire crackled and spat, consuming her future. The yams, the cassava, everything gone. A guttural cry escaped her lips, a sound of pure, undiluted despair. His eyes wide with a drunken confusion that quickly turned to shock as he grasped the magnitude of the disaster. But even then, he offered no comfort, no words of solace. He just stared, a silent, useless statue, amidst the ruins of her labor. The fire broke something in Patience, but it was the events of the following night that would shatter her world completely. Little Blessing, who had been listless all day, began to burn with a fever that raged like the fire in the shed. Her small body, usually so full of life, became rigid. Her eyes rolled back, and she began to convulse. A terrifying, violent shaking that seemed to tear her apart from the inside. The word struck Patience with the force of a physical blow. In a blind panic, she scooped up her daughter and ran through the darkened village, her screams for help echoing into the night. "My baby! Someone help my baby!" Emmanuel, sobered by the raw terror in her voice, followed behind, his usual apathy finally pierced by the horrifying sight of his convulsing child. The hospital was a blur of sterile white walls and the smell of antiseptic. A doctor with weary eyes confirmed their worst fears: severe malarial convulsions. Blessing needed immediate intensive treatment. He gave them a list of medications and a bill that made Patience's blood run cold. The cost was staggering, far beyond anything she could imagine paying, especially now that her harvest was gone. Fluorescent lit hallway, that the wall between Patience and Emmanuel finally crumbled. She turned to him, her face streaked with tears and soot, her eyes blazing with a pain so profound it was terrifying. "Look," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Look at what you have done. Your drinking, your laziness, ... We have nothing. Now our daughter is dying." For the first time Emmanuel truly saw her. He saw the years of exhaustion etched onto her face, not as an abstract problem for tomorrow, but as the potential death of his own child, here and now. The weight of his failures crashed down on him, suffocating him. He sank to the floor, his head in his hands, gut-wrenching sobs shaking his body. "I will get the money," he said, his voice raw. He left the hospital and walked to the market, to the stall of a man who bought and sold used goods. There he unstrapped the one valuable thing he owned, a vintage wristwatch, a gift from his late father, his last connection to a time before his life had unraveled. He sold it without a second thought, the price a fraction of its worth, pressing the cash into the stunned pharmacist's hand. He spent the night on the cold floor outside Blessing's room, listening to her faint cries, praying with a fervor he hadn't felt in years. He wasn't just praying for his daughter, he was praying for a chance to become the man she deserved. As her fever broke and her small hands began to grip his finger, Emmanuel felt a profound shift within him. He went to a construction site, begging for the hardest, most grueling work they had. He spent his days hauling bricks and mixing cement, his soft hands quickly blistering and bleeding, but he welcomed the pain. Each drop of sweat felt like an act of penance, a small step toward rebuilding what he had destroyed. When Patience brought Blessing home, she found a different man waiting for her. He was thinner, his face etched with a new kind of exhaustion, but his eyes were clear. He didn't offer grand apologies or empty promises. Instead, he handed her his day's wages, a small but significant offering. That evening, he began clearing the charred remains of the shed, his movements deliberate and purposeful. The whispers of judgment softened into murmurs of surprise, then respect. The same neighbors who had once gossiped now arrived with small gifts of food. The men, seeing Emmanuel's relentless effort, offered him better-paying work, a nod of acceptance. The community, once a source of judgment, became a net of support, lifting the family up. Patience watched it all, a quiet strength blooming within her. She had discovered a resilience she never knew she possessed. She had faced the worst life could throw at her, and had not only survived, but had also sparked a transformation in the man beside her. Their life was still hard. The debt still loomed, and the memory of the fire and the illness was a fresh scar. But now, they faced it together. One evening, as they sat outside their hut watching Blessing take her first wobbly steps, Emmanuel reached for Patience's hand. Patience squeezed his hand, her gaze fixed on their daughter, a living symbol of their second chance. The burdens were still heavy, but they were walking the path together, hand in hand. And subscribe for more content that explores the power of hope and human connection.